activities at these meetings. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. It's still going to be about wombats, so it's not going to be completely different. But before I do that, and when we get the logo up, there it is. I'd like you to just consider the logo for a second. Wombats SA, Wombats South Australia. Now, don't worry about the icon, but South Australia is actually unique when it comes to wombats, because not only do we have a wombat as our state fauna or emblem, but we are the only state that has significant populations of 2 different wombat species. Queensland has 2, but the numbers are so low as to be essentially ecologically irrelevant. And there's probably more wombats on Burundi than there are in the entire state of Queensland. New South Wales used to have all 3 species present, but both hairy-nosed species are now extinct in that state, and it's only the common or bare-nosed wombat that remains in New South Wales. And that's actually what I want to talk to you about today. Next slide, please. The other wombats of South Australia. Because, interestingly, as we have been discussing, next slide, please, we have a reserve down in the southeastern part of the state where these wombats live. That's the Cullen Reserve, right outside Road. And that's the reserve itself, for those of you who have not been down there, right on the edge of town. And there's the caravan park just in here, just so you can orient yourself. And I've been down there recently doing some research on the wombats of the area, and I went to Cullen Reserve and put some cameras in, did a bit of survey of the wombats. And yes, there are wombats on Cullen Reserve. This is from a burrow which is right on the eastern boundary of the park, adjacent to the caravan park. And not only the wombats, they're actually breeding, so they're doing quite well in the area. And it's not just wombats. There are some other interesting species on Cullen Reserve. That's actually swamp wallaby, and that's right on the far western edge of the swamp wallaby distribution. You won't find anything any further north or west of that area. Brush-tailed possums, but there are some not so friendly animals on Cullen Reserve, like this fox, and like this cat, and this cat. Now, whether these are feral cats or not, I can't determine, but because it's right on the edge of town, these might just be domestic cats from the local town. Anyway, having them in the area is not desirable, as you might imagine. So, anyway, that's all fascinating, but why do we care? The society is mainly set up, as you know, to deal with southern hairy-nosed wombats, so why do we care about common wombats? Well, let me answer that by showing you this slide. This is a distribution of wombats in Victoria. And as you can see, there's essentially none in the western half of the state, apart from a couple of populations down here in the far southwest. That's not natural. There's no reason why wombat shouldn't be in the western half of West Victoria. And the reason is because wombats were once declared vermin in Victoria, and not only could you cull them with impunity, the government actually paid a bounty for every wombat that was killed in the state. So you could get paid to kill wombats in Victoria. Now, even though that bounty was removed in 1966, you can still cull wombats with impunity right up until 2020, when they were officially protected in the state. So it's only very, very recently they became protected. And to say they're protected in the state is probably a bit of an overstatement, because it's not really enforced with any degree of vigour. So wombats are actually quite endangered in Victoria in many respects. In fact, there's only half as many wombats in the entire state of Victoria as there are in Tasmania. So, not a good situation. So, essentially these wombats down here are all recent arrivals from South Australia. So if this was to be fixed in some respect, it would require a healthy population in South Australia for wombats to migrate across into the state. So, is the population in the southeast of South Australia healthy? I decided to go down and check, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of information available down there. Most of the information we have comes from citizen science places like this. It's called WOMSAT. It's run by the University of Western Sydney. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's a citizen science page where you can put your own sightings of wombats. And I would encourage you all, first of all, to not only have a look at it, but to enter data. Every time you see a wombat, whether it's live, dead, whatever, put the information in here, because not only does it give us good tracking information of where wombats can and can't be found, but they use it for research, so identifying roadkill hotspots and things of that nature. That's a really, really good resource. So I went into WOMSAT and I extracted as much information as I can on the wombat population in the southeast of the state. Then I went down there to check it out myself, and these yellow dots are my data. So as you can see, the information is pretty good. There's some places where I found wombats were not in WOMSAT, but at least on face value, that looks like a relatively healthy population. But if you look a bit closer, you'll start to see there are huge gaps in the population. So essentially, all this farmland, wombats are not present. Unlike, say, southern hairy-nosed wombats, which can survive quite well on grazing land, common wombats do not do that. They actually prefer these wooded areas, and the population tends to be restricted to these areas of remnant bushland with no real connecting areas in between. So what we've ended up with is isolated populations scattered all the way around the southeast with no clear lines or interactions between the two, all the different populations. Next one, please. As you can see, all these dark green areas are where the wombat lives, and all these light green areas in the middle, there are no wombats. If you have a look at that though, you think, oh yeah, there's a fair few dark green areas down here, and so there might be some areas where wombats are, but once again, if you look a bit closer, a lot of these dark green areas are not actually remnant bushland. There's a lot of pine forests down in the southeast of the state, and they are not great for wombats. Here's one area up here in the north. There's a pine forest on the left and some remnant bushland on the right. And so I decided to do a bit of a survey. I walked up here and back down through the pine forest, and this is what I discovered. A lot of burrows all through the bushland, and I found one in here, but if you look at the difference between them, that's a typical wombat burrow in the remnant bushland, and this is what it looks like in the pine forest. And that burrow there is inactive, there's no wombats living in it. And it's pretty easy to see why. The whole ground's covered in pine needles, it's quite sterile, there's nothing there for them to eat. And every 10 years or so they come through, mechanically strip all the trees anyway, so this big heavy machinery destroys what burrows are in the area. Okay, so you would think there's no wombats on farmland in the south, but this is interesting. This is a property just near Salt Creek, which is in the far northern end of the Coorong National Park. And this farmer, this is a cattle property, you see there's wombat burrows all over this cow paddock. Interestingly enough, if this was a southern hairy-nosed, say pasture or paddock, all these would be warrens. Every single one of these dots is a single wombat burrow. These are not communal animals, they tend to live in single burrows. There's a few scattered through here, through the bushland. This is called, I forgot the name of the park. Anyway, this is all sort of conservation area here. And this farmer has quite a few wombats on his property. But like most farmers, he's not overly happy with them for obvious reasons. This is on the western boundary fence of his property. As you can see, the burrows tending to undermine his fence. This is a pump house right on the edge of his dam, and the wombat's gone in there and dug out, and he's covered his water pump in dirt, and he's not overly happy with that concept. And there's another fence which the wombats have just essentially destroyed. So this guy, even though he's tolerating wombats for the moment, he's not happy with them, and if he had his druthers, he would have them removed. What that means is a lot of the wombats have been pushed out of the farmland, and a lot of them live in roadside reserves. And this is all farmland here. This is a roadside reserve, and there's just a road just running just by here. But as you can see, this is undermining the farmer's fence, and he's made some sort of tentative efforts to fix it by putting mesh and things in to try and keep the wombats off the land. But once again, you'll find a lot of burrows in these roadside reserves. Even places like this, very common in a lot of these roadsides down in the southeast. You see wombat burrows burrowing in the side of these cutaways. Once again, another roadside reserve, more wombats. Fortunately, this is a country road, a country dirt road, but right on the edge of the Princes Highway, right? This is not conducive to survivability. In fact, I saw more dead wombats down in the southeast of the state on the side of the road than I have anywhere else. If you go out to places like Penang and Nundru in the west of the state, you'll see a lot of dead wombats. You'll see a few scattered around Murundi, but down here, I saw more dead wombats on the side of the road than I have anywhere. And so it's quite a problem for the wombats in this area. Doing things like this, they just don't last long, unfortunately. Another problem they're experiencing is mange. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this poor guy, but he is covered in scabs and bites and mange. Mange is a massive problem for common wombats. Now, mange does occur in the southern hairy nose population, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is in the common wombat population. And the reason for that is essentially the cooler and moisture conditions where these guys live is much more conducive to the survivability of the mites of host. So every state, apart from South Australia, has a dedicated mange management program to treat animals. People go out with sticks, treatment on the end of the stick, and try and treat the animals. Burrow flaps, which automatically dispenses the mange medication. So New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, all have dedicated programs. We unfortunately do not. Some people do, but it's very ad hoc, and we would certainly benefit from having a program like this. The next big problem they're suffering from is rabbits. The old, biggest bugbear of wombats all the way across the country. They're actually starting to see a huge rise in rabbits down in the southeast of the state, and the councils down there are trying to get us to do something about it. And just to show you what the problem's like, yeah, this is an image taken in the southeast of the state, and as you can see, there's one or two rabbits in the area. Essentially, calicivirus, whilst they have a devastating effect on rabbits, they're starting to recover, populations starting to recover, they're starting to have a little bit of immunity to calicivirus too, and populations are starting to come back just like that. So really need to do something about it. Okay, so what is the problem with common wombats in South Australia? As we've gone through, essentially all these populations, they're isolated, they're fragmented, which means they are at danger of things like genetic isolation. They're very vulnerable to disturbance and disease, and isolated populations could very quickly disappear, not just from this, but if the farmer gets sick of them, he decides to wipe them out, that's a problem. Land clearance, southern hairy-nosed wombats do survive well in grazing land, not in cropland obviously, but in grazing land, but these guys are forest animals. Land clearance has a huge impact on them, so if land clearance gets worse, some of these animals will disappear. Roadkill, as I mentioned, mange, and of course, rabbits. So let me just conclude this quick presentation by asking a philosophical question of the society. Are we Wombats SA, or are we Southern Hairy-Nosed Wombats SA? We talked a lot about Cullen Reserve and the getting things done down the southeast, and it obviously has huge resource implications, but it's something you may wish to consider. And I think that guy actually looks pretty much like a common wombat anyway. So. Any questions? Comments?
make a couple. I've recently been down in the southeast,
Yep.
done a bit of driving around. I didn't see a single dead wombat.
Really?
Just this is only 10 days ago.
Okay.
And the only other comment was to make, God's sake, let's do something about rabbits. There are even rabbits in the botanic gardens in the middle of the city.
Go to the worst I saw it was is it Southend? What's the town?
Southend.
Yeah. There's a national park and conservation reserve right on the headland, and driving in and out of that town, I saw them everywhere. Dead wombats everywhere.
Little Dip.
Right?
Little Dip.
No. Little dips that's behind our reserve.
Yeah. Maybe you're just fortunate, I
I
don't
think
know.
we must have been.
Yeah.
I
Right.
saw echidnas.
Yeah. In fact, it became a good way for me to identify the wombat burrows in the woodlands. I'd drive down the road. Oh, there's a dead one. There must be a burrow nearby, and it was quite common to find them.
Am I correct in thinking that the problem with the rabbits is that the rabbits, when there's too many of them, they eat the grasses that the wombats are reliant upon?
It's threefold. There's that one, of course. They do inhabit wombat burrows, and they can sort of drive them out that way. But the biggest problem is that the way to control for rabbits is to destroy their homes, and that's essentially how northern hairy-nosed wombats went extinct in New South Wales. Farmers would destroy wombat burrows to destroy homes for rabbits. So essentially it's not just the rabbits themselves, but it's our actions to control rabbits which end up killing the wombats.
Remote attendee Adrian Jones said that last time he did a trip down the Coorong on the main road, he saw 5 dead wombats.
Yeah.
So can I push you a wee bit on comparing the common wombat versus the hairy-nosed? And have you got any view about the numbers of individuals that occur in the warrens of those two species? Are there more hairy-nosed wombats per burrow than there are common wombats per burrow?
It's a good question, and I guess we don't really know the answer. I mean, I did a lot of work on the number of southern hairy-nosed wombats per burrow, because it's essentially a very good way to identify them. You know, we can see southern hairy-nosed wombats from satellite imagery, so by knowing that, we can then go out and do field research and look at how many active burrows, how many are active, and we can do the calculations. Unfortunately, these guys, the only way to see them is to tramp across the bush. And doing, it's just an aside, doing research on southern hairy-nosed is great. You just walk across the country and you see burrows everywhere. With these guys, you're trampling through, thick scrub. It's 3 steps forward, 5 steps sideways, 2 steps back, and you don't actually see them until you tread on them almost. So no one has done the work to calculate these sort of numbers. In some ways, this wouldn't be as useful a metric anyway, because we just don't know how many burrows are out there. Certainly in South Australia, they've done research in New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania, and Flinders Island, and they've got a pretty good handle on the number of wombats in each of those locations. And there's about twice as many common wombats in the country as there are southern hairy-nosed. Just this is a broad number.
Well, just on that, can you put a figure on, how many individuals, in the hairy-nosed wombats, is there usually just a pair in any one burrow, or is there more than one pair in a particular burrow, typically?
You talk about hairy-nosed?
Yeah.
The number I calculated was about 0.4 per active burrow. So sometimes, as you would know, hairy-nosed wombats don't just live in one burrow. They'll move around to different burrows. I think the numbers that Matt Gorn calculated was about there's an average of about 5 burrows they'll use throughout their home range, with a maximum of 10 in some cases. Matt's got a much more better handle on that than I have. But then sometimes you'll have obviously nobody down an active burrow because it maybe hasn't been occupied for 1 or 2 days. Sometimes you'll have 1. I've seen 3 down one active burrow, sometimes 2, but that's not, I want to say it's common, but it's not all the time. It's rarer that you'll have more than one wombat down a burrow than you will have one or none.
Okay.
I read somewhere in the paper, and I'm not sure it's true or not, that government funding for research into the next rabbit virus to go on cancer, the old one, has actually been cut. Is that true, you know, or are they still researching on virus?
I couldn't answer that one. I'm not sure. The original Khaleesi virus was released. I think someone stole it from Wardang Island or whatever. It was not supposed to be released, and they let it go because they probably got sick of the rabbits. And then was a Khaleesi virus 2, which was a sort of evolution of that, had gone through. We did some collection of rabbit carcasses out on the Nullarbor, and you can see that even the Khaleesi virus 2 had spread rapidly across the state. But as you said, they're starting to, populations are definitely recovering all over the country. That's probably the extreme version, but even if you go out in Nullarbor, you'll see rabbits everywhere, unfortunately.
We were in Victoria a few weeks ago and went to do a night tour of a reserve, and as we drove out we came to a four-way corner and thought, hang on, which way we want to go here? Stopped, and I did a U-turn, and the headlights went across there, and we saw as many rabbits as you were showing in that photo, just in the corner of one of the paddocks there. So they're clearly everywhere like that.
I live in Gore, and I take my dogs down to the local park to walk the dogs, and they chase rabbits all the time, and there's rabbits everywhere.
I'm going to say, Brian, do you remember how many from that talk that was the talk that we're putting into the journal? Do you remember how many burrows Rob Brooks found on the Cullen Reserve?
I can't remember.
About 70.
About 70. Thank you.
It's about wombats or rabbits?
Sorry, wombat.
No, I found quite a few on a map. Mostly in the eastern part. You go over there wasn't as many on the western side of the park.
Rob Brooks mapped the whole reserve and we found 70 over it. And he thought about another 10 were unoccupied, but most of them were occupied.
Someone stole a couple of my cameras when I put them in too, so or if you find a couple of cameras, well, either that or I just couldn't find them again, so if you go down there again, you'd find some cameras there.
Right.
That would be mine.
I was just wondering, if you've got this increase in the number of rabbits, is that resulting in an increase in the number of foxes?
I couldn't answer that one, I don't know.
Very likely.
Yeah.
Do the foxes chase the wombats?
It's a good question. I've got cameras out all over the countryside, and I've never seen an instance of a fox taking a wombat. I see plenty of foxes hunting in and around wombat warrens. It's very common, and you see like the cats. I've got cats going down inside. I honestly don't think they're hunting the wombats. I think they're hunting things like mice and birds and lizards and things like that, which are very common around the burrow. So I've never seen a fox or even a dingo come out with a wombat in its mouth. But I have seen plenty of instances of things with rabbits and lizards and things like that. Yeah. I think anything other than the tiniest baby wombat would be too big for a fox to handle.
Yeah.
What about cats? Because cats would cats take them?
Same thing. I've seen cats. Oh, look, I think if there was this big fell out of his mother's pouch, the cat would probably go for it. But once again, I think they're hunting things like lizards and even things like grasshoppers and things, which I've seen cats eating around wombat warrens. Birds. I've seen bird nests inside wombat warrens. So yeah, probably cats are hunting them. I've seen eagles perching on my camera posts on wombat warrens, so wouldn't be surprised if an eagle was hunting a wombat.
We just had a recent motion sensor camera where a fox went down into a burrow which it was occupied by a wombat.
Yes.
And it was sat in there, or it was underground for 15 minutes and then it came back out again. And then the next day the wombat was coming and going
Yeah.
normally anyhow.
Yeah. I've seen four dingoes on one warrant, and going down inside the warrant. And actually, it was interesting because they went down in one hole and came out a different hole, which proved they were interconnected, but they didn't kill any wombats. No.
So, I mean, just pushing the question one bit further, is the evidence for common wombats being monogamous pretty good, do you know?
I'm not enough of an expert on their. I'm not enough of an expert on their biology and their sociology, and I think that's the problem. We've done a lot of research. I'm aware of a lot of the research on southern hairy nose, but the research on these guys is nowhere near as extensive as it is on southern hairy nose. Interestingly enough, they've done some work in Tasmania. I know guys like Scott Carter, who you probably know Scott Carter.
Yeah.
He's probably one of the experts on that, and Julie Old from the University of Western Sydney has done a lot of work on them as well. But things like that, I'm just not aware of any work that's been done. And one of the things I think we need to do is a good survey of these guys in the southeast of South Australia, because we've got a pretty good handle on numbers in New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, Flinders Island. No one's ever done the work down here. Well, my work has been pretty ad hoc, and just I go down there just to have a bit of a poke around and do some preliminary work, but I haven't done the detailed research on them to know how the population is travelling. Realistically, this is the first time it's been done. There was some stuff done back in the 1980s by Brian Cook, Mallet, but really that was as an aside. They were doing rabbit stuff, and the wombats were sort of an add-on to that. So there's no data. Any data we collect now, but nothing to compare it with from the past. But I think we definitely need to do it. It'd be nice to get down there and do some dedicated surveys to find out exactly how many there are, where they are, and how the population is changing over time. What the extent, for example, of the mange is, things like that.
We know whether there's a mange on Pelham Reserve. Is that?
I've never seen any, but
So I didn't see any. In the images I took. But as I said, that I just stumbled across that. I was just driving down the road in the middle of the day and saw that thing, so I jumped out and took his photo. But there's definitely, it's in the area for sure.
yeah.
I have a
Are
question.
there any further questions?
We have
I
a
do.
on-board question. Yes, please.
Yeah, I had a question. You showed a picture of damage to fences, and I was wondering, are the farmers unaware of the WPSA's Wombat Gate that has been successfully installed along Wombat tracks in a fence to prevent the damage? They can just go through the gate, and it doesn't allow other animals to go through there.
To be quite honest, I don't know whether the farmers are aware of it or not. Interesting. It was interesting driving down that road where I showed that on the edge of that farmer's property. I saw lots of areas where I thought there were wombats burrowing under the fence. Lots of tracks. You can see tracks coming in one side, coming out the other side. But some of them were wombats, some of them weren't. Some of them were obviously wallabies, because you can see that there was no wombats. That's one way I would discover where wombat burrows were. I would trace these trails back into the woods, but there were no wombats to be found, so these turned out to be wallabies. But I don't know whether these guys are aware of it. It's certainly something they could consider, but as you can see, they're already on his property, so the point becomes moot in some respects. It's not so much they're going into the land to feed; they're going out into other areas. Okay, thank you very much.